Right. Liz, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I'm assuming everyone can see Chris's screen, but it's clear to me.
Got the thumbs up. Great. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Chris Taylor. I'm the Director of Large Customer Services here at PHI. Our service territories include Pepco, Delmarva Power, and Atlantic City Electric. We're part of the corporate company Exelon. So our sister companies include Baltimore Gas and Electric, PECO in the Philadelphia area, as well as ComEd in Illinois. Pepco and GSA, we actually entered into an MOU together in 2023, really to help GSA meet their goals as a Pepco customer. So really areas of focus for this MOU include building electrification, electric vehicles and charging equipment, as well as resiliency. So we just want to ensure that we at Pepco are planning our systems to meet GSA's initiatives and timelines. So we'll actually occasionally host customer collaborative meetings, such as today, really to share information about topics and trends that we're seeing in the industry. So today we'll be focused on electric vehicles and charging equipment. So here at Pepco, the account management teams work with many customers as they've considered converting their vehicles to electric. And so today's webinar will be informational in nature, really intended to provide information that might be helpful to you in your planning process. So on the call, we have folks from our account management teams, including James Pringle, the manager of the Pepco account management team. We also have several members of the distribution engineering team and customer design teams as well. So thank you very much for them for being on the call. And then we also have several members of the team that will be presenting, and they'll introduce themselves as we progress through the conversation. But in terms of the order of the agenda, first, Elizabeth Pensker from GSA, she'll actually go through the overarching executive orders. And then from there, the Pepco team will start sharing about how we go about planning our system in preparation for electric vehicles more broadly, more customer load. Then we'll go through what to think about in terms of planning for electric vehicles with us, and then we'll share the current programs we offer. We'll then touch on a new tool that's a fleet calculator on our website that can be used by anybody. And then we'll hand it back over to Liz to go through key takeaways and resources from GSA. And then at that point, we'll open it up for questions. So we will actually be distributing the PowerPoint after the presentation, as well as a link to this recording in case you want to reference it in the future. I would actually note that we did the same presentation on Monday to another group within GSA in the National Capital Region. And so we're doing the same presentation today. So if you find yourself have already attended the call on Monday, we're actually doing the same presentation. So, no need to stay in this meeting because of the same message. But we do ask that everyone stay on mute during the presentation until we get to the Q&A as well. So, before we start, I did just want to say, thank you very much for spending an hour with us out of your day. We know we all have so many different priorities and things we're responsible for. So it just means a lot that you're spending time with us this afternoon. And so before we start, just for folks to know who Pepco is, we always assume that folks know. But we always like to share that Pepco is the distribution and transmission company within the Washington, D.C., parts of Prince George's County and Montgomery County. We don't actually generate power. We just are a delivery company. So our service territory is about 640 square miles. We have 135 substations, and we have almost 1 million customers. A lot of the GSA buildings are what we call high voltage customers. And so many of you are familiar with the terminology of customer vault government or CVG. But those are really the customer and equipment that are served through our networks to serve many of your facilities as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth Pensker.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And thanks to all of you for, as Chris said, for joining us this afternoon, especially it's late in the day for some of you. So we really do appreciate your interest and your participation today. And if you could flip to the next slide. Very quickly, I did just want to mention that there are a couple of key executive orders that have dictated how agencies should proceed forward with electrifying their fleet and how they should think about their fleet vehicles. As Chris had said, GSA and PEPCO have signed an MOU, and one of the areas of concern for both the federal government in this region and for the the utility are how agencies go about electrifying their fleets and putting in the necessary infrastructure to support electrified vehicles. So Executive Order 14008 directed agencies in general to create a procurement strategy for zero emission vehicles, or ZEVs, to apply to all government fleets. So that is, the federal government. That was also state governments. That's tribal governments. It's local governments. It's government writ large. So that was supposed to get all agencies and government entities to start thinking about how to plan for fleet electrification. But the big one that really had concrete goals is EO 14057. That's a very large executive order, covers a lot of sustainability related mandates, but specific to this topic, it set some specific and, for the government, perhaps some very aggressive targets to electrify all of the fleet vehicles. So by 2027, FY27, which is 2 years from now, all light duty vehicle acquisitions need to be zero emission vehicles. And then the really big target is 2035. So in just over a decade, all vehicle acquisitions by the federal government need to be zero emission vehicles. And so in order to achieve these targets, agencies have to rapidly expand their fleet of charging infrastructure. And PEPCO is going to be talking to you about the impact of doing this on this region, on the grid, and ways to think about doing that. And that is also a major concern for GSA. I'm in the public building service, so we work with all of the customer agencies in this region to install infrastructure if they are interested in doing so. I did also highlight 2 additional GSA specific mandates. There are, of course, quite a few. We always have a lot of mandates. But the 2 that are listed here are lay out very specifically how to start implementing and installing infrastructure. That GSA order um, provides guidance on how to install EVSE, we call it electric vehicle supply equipment, at all GSA owned and leased facilities. So whether you are in a GSA owned and operated building, whether you are in a leased facility, or whether you're in a GSA owned and delegated facility, this order applies to you. Not all of GSA's mandates apply to leased facilities, however. So that second non-hot linked document is a specific procurement bulletin, and excuse me, and it dictates that the GSA Public Building Services indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts for EVSE procurements must be utilized if you are trying to procure infrastructure for a GSA owned and operated facility. If you are in a leased facility or if you are in a delegated facility, this bulletin does not apply to your agency. Um, you are obviously welcome to use this contract. We'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, but you are not required to do so. One other key thing, and the reason it's mentioned here, that this bulletin does lay out is that if EVSE is installed at a GSA operated facility, it must be network capable. Needs to be able to connect to a network so that usage can be tracked, electric usage, and if necessary, could be shut off, it could kind of regulate who gets to use this charging station. And before I turn it back over to Chris, again, anything that is underlined, highlighted here, it's a hot link. You can go directly to it. This bulletin is not, because it is behind GSA's firewall, so only GSA employees can access it. If you would like a copy, reach out to me after this presentation and I can just send you a PDF of it. And I will turn it back over. Oh, I do want to comment on one thing. You don't have to go back to that, but the 2 pictures that are here, do highlight some of the, quite nicely, some of the requirements for installing EVSE at federal properties. And so when you get a copy of this, you can look at how some of this was done and think about that when we're talking about specific requirements at the end of this presentation. So thank you. Take it away, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. All right, so this next session is really meant to outline how we at PEPCO go about planning our system. At times, EVSEs may require additional capacity, and we wanted to share how we plan holistically in advance of projects such as this. So, Will, hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you for that intro there, Chris. Yeah, my name is Will Davis. I'm the manager of regional capacity planning for the District of Columbia. Next slide, please. As Chris was saying, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do in distribution planning and what we kind of some of the inputs we use for our load forecasting. So what we do in distribution planning is make informed decisions on critical infrastructures to maintain the safety and reliability of the grid throughout short and long-term plans using advanced analytics and tools. Uh, One of the things we also are doing is always looking for new ways and improvements to our load forecasting process to adopt to industry best practices. In capacity planning, we also evaluate and ensure the safe and reliability interconnection of DERs on the system. We assist our customers with the interconnection of DERs. Um, we do this by having several different maps and other public-facing tools on our that is readily available for our customers. For example, we do have hosting capacity maps on the on our website. Our team is also proactively looking for new approaches to integrate new technologies, data sets, and models to enable more DERs on the PHI system as well. Next slide, Dave, Chris. So this is kind of like our forecasting. What we do in planning is forecast load, basically. So when we do our capacity forecasting, we also take into account some reliability matrices and issues when we do our forecasting. So I call this our wheel of planning. So at the beginning of our forecasting process, we try to engage our customers to provide as much details about projects as possible. That's where we look for everyone to give us as much information about future projects as possible. This is where Chris was saying how the more information we have at the beginning of a project, the better it is for us when we're doing our planning. We use this information to provide We use the information provided to help forecast the load and impact that the load will have on our distribution system. From here, we go to our system assessment, where we model the system under forecasted conditions to identify constraints that must be addressed to maintain the safety and reliability of the system. And then we start from there, we develop our solutions where we consider a range of options to meet our system's needs. And finally, we implement the solutions that are developed. Thank you, Chris. Any questions for me?
Great. I think we'll do questions at the end, but thank you very much, Will. And I think in terms of the solutions and the implementations, it could involve feeder improvements, could involve substation capacity expansions, or even new substations itself. And so, since we're talking to really the National Capital Region, we did just want to give an example of the planning process and how it will wind up into implementation. So on the screen here is just a slide at a very high level about the Capital Grid project. If you wanted more information, it's on our website, but really it's a integrated solution that solves a number of things for us. The Capital Grid project is meant to add resiliency to our system, add additional capacity, as well as replace aging infrastructure. So around the District of Columbia, you'll see this blue ring. That's actually a 500 kV ring. And from there, their transmission corridors into the District of Columbia. Historically, that power has been imported through transmission lines that are one way, kind of radial into the city. This project includes installing a 230 kV transmission line through the District of Columbia that allows the network system to be networked. So multiple pathways of power for a transmission system. Along the way, we have built one new substation at First and K Street Northwest, the Mount Vernon substation. And then we've also updated 3 substations, including Harvard substation, Champlain substation, and Tacoma. And so from Champlain substation, we then have another series of projects for us to resupply and add capacity to many of the substations in the downtown footprint. Many of the GSA buildings are close to these substations. You may not realize it's a substation, it's an indoor building, but very critical infrastructure. That from the Champlain sub, we're now rebuilding the F Street sub, the L Street sub, retiring one substation, and then resupplying others. So, very big, important projects that are the result of the planning process and the inputs that we get from developers and the broader customers are used to develop our long-term plans. So with that, we'll hand it over to Vince Wynn as we kind of narrow into electric vehicles in that process. So Vince, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vince Wynn, manager of EV programs here at PHI. I'm going to cover things a little higher level, take a step back from my day-to-day to speak to the Exelon level of things. So this slide shows the different angles that we're approaching fleet electrification at Exelon. We have a number of activities and efforts underway within Exelon to support fleet electrification. One of the main ones is the electrification of our own fleet. So this initiative kind of tackles two objectives at once. The first being, to meet our own path to clean goals and reducing our carbon footprint within Exelon itself, but also provides us with a lot of lessons learned that we can share internally and externally for other folks that are looking to undergo projects and electrify their own fleets. Our current goal for our own fleet is to electrify 30% of our fleet vehicles by 2025 and 50% of the fleet by 2030. So this goes to we have a few different layers of zero emission goals, basically looking at scope 1 and scope 2, of what we can control ourselves. And this is a big element of that. So we're going forward with that for those purposes, but as I said, the other major part of this is to build our understanding of what it takes to do this. We looked at this and said, if we're going to encourage our customers to electrify their fleets and electrify their own vehicles, we should have a good understanding of the hurdles that come up, the challenges that we're presented with, and what we can learn from just exploring this on our own. So this allows us, we partner with other electric utility companies, OEMs, and different associations so that we can not start over every single time we come to a new stage, but rather share our learnings in this industry that's developing day by day. That constant communication is extremely valuable, and things just like this webinar that we're doing today really goes a long way in helping the entire industry move forward at a pace that is, can help meet those goals that we have. Also with this, it helps us influence our customer-facing programs. So incentive programs throughout each of our jurisdictions that, we're trying to drive participation and drive this electrification journey. We want to make sure that we're pinpointing where we're providing assistance, where we can provide financial incentives, so that the pain points are addressed. The biggest pain points are addressed up front to help everybody else move along. If you want to click to the next one, Chris. So this next one, it kind of takes a bigger look at some of our objectives that the fleet electrification can tackle. Like I said, we're taking a multifaceted approach when we're electrifying our fleet, and taking those learnings and applying them broadly and looking at how everything connects together, figuring out how this affects our employees, how this can advance our own initiatives, and also look at the reliability and resiliency, how to electrify our fleet in a way that doesn't disrupt our normal operations. So we obviously have pretty high standards as a utility. The lights have to stay on, the power has to flow. So as we're going through our electrification processes, we're making sure that we have redundancies in place, and then looking at how this can evolve into just a normal day-to-day operations. Right now, it's a special initiative to electrify our fleet, but we want to get to a point where this is just standard operating procedure. So as vehicles need to be replaced, as the life cycles go through their different stages, we're prepared that we have something ready, and then eventually this will just become how business is done rather than something special that we have to do. So taking that holistic approach, assessing things as we go, and making sure that we're making adjustments in this learning stage so that when the time comes, we can just carry on and it will just become a normal part of our day-to-day business. Hit the next one, Chris. So this slide dives a little bit more into our fleet electrification journey and where we are in that process. As of now, Exelon's electrified about 20% of its fleet. And as I said on the last slide, right, the next step of this is really to determine and lay out a plan for how we can scale this and just make it a normal process. Everything's been accelerating in the industry, so we've obviously seen an acceleration in our own efforts early on, just doing that assessment and figuring out the key pieces that we have to have in place, and then going through it systematically, so that at this stage we've got a fairly good handle on how we want to proceed with things, but still, cognizant of the challenges and hurdles that we need to overcome to get to the finish line. So this next one is highlighting a study that was done that is a valuable resource sponsored by Exelon that I believe we can make available to folks on the call. Goes into some of the details for folks that are just starting their journey on electrification, getting into it, or even somewhat down that path, but still looking for insights and looking for good lessons learned. This was an initiative to consolidate those, put it into a report so that it can be drawn from as a resource for folks. This comes from a different group within Exelon, but I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, we can make this available to folks if there's interest in getting their hands on this one.
That'd be part of the wrap up afterwards. We'll send that out.
Excellent. All right. This last one here, this is customer facing tool that we have available on our website. It's the EV roadmap. So this kind of gives a good sense of the amount of coordination that's required for fleet electrification projects with your utility. There's a lot of back and forth, right? So nothing happens, just one and done in terms of communication. It's an ongoing process. And taking a look at this and looking at things holistically, thinking many steps ahead is key to having a smooth rollout and a smooth electrification process, because you don't want to go 6 months into a project and realize that something wasn't quite built out to where it's going to ultimately end up in 5-10 years. You have to restart. Knowing what you need, knowing what your end goal is at the beginning is extremely helpful in going through each step of this. And then it's just also helpful to highlight how long it could take, right? This is an involved process on all sides. So just having a good understanding that certain things have to be in place before you can move to the next step. This is a valuable resource and kind of lays it out in a nice illustration as to what's going to be expected in terms of customer and utility integration and coordination on a project like this. Somebody in our team, Chris Bazinski, another Chris that wasn't able to be here today, he likes to say, be best friends with your utility. And I found that to be very true, right? The closer you can work, get to know your utility partners, establish that relationship, goes a long way in just helping navigate this process and go through it smoothly. So this brings us to my day-to-day. A lot of the lessons that we've learned and a lot of just keeping an eye on the industry and those shared experiences that we're able to draw from, led us to a strategic framework that's laid out here for transportation electrification. We try to approach all of our customer programs holistically and look at all the different elements that can go into it. So the make-ready work for getting infrastructure in the ground, customer education and assistance, just informing customers of what's available, what the stages are, and how to go about it. Obviously, equitable and affordable access is huge for Exelon, and we try to make sure that as we're building this electrified future, that we're bringing everybody along and we're not only focusing on one segment or neglecting key segments that might not be as far along as others in their journey. Another important component is load flexibility. So we're not only trying to electrify fleets, but we are looking ahead at the utility level of how do we manage this going into the future. So we need to be cognizant of different tools that we have to manage load, to educate customers about managing their load and how that all plays together, which rate design is a component of. So that leads right into our rate design and what we're trying to develop that's not traditional. We're looking at situations that they don't follow what we've done for the last 100 years. So we're trying to find new creative ways to design rates so that people are incentivized or clear on the implications of their habits and the implications of electrifying vehicles and other equipment all at the same time in this bigger electrification picture. And I think the last piece of this is grants. So there's obviously federal initiatives, grant dollars that are available. We want to look at these so everything complements one another and stacks together wherever possible to have the greatest impact. So trying to keep track of all of the different things that are available in different jurisdictions through different agencies, making sure that we're cognizant of that is definitely a part of our strategy going forward as well. So on the screen here is just an overview of some of the programs that we have. We're not just focused on vehicle electrification, it's transportation electrification as a whole. So looking at commercial applications, figuring out how residential, commercial, and everything in between ties together and where we can have an impact there. So developing time of use rates that meet the need, trying to address different levels of demand, different timing of that demand. We have programs in place and we've done pilots over the last 5 years to learn as much as we can and then narrow in on where we can have the most impact. So in all of our jurisdictions, we're in various stages of these programs. We're looking at managed charging is a very hot topic right now that we're currently exploring and looking to expand offerings to new customer subsets. Right now, we're focused on the residential applications of that, but we're also incentivizing fleets by providing assessments, providing knowledge, and then looking at incentivizing make-ready processes. So getting the power to where it needs to be can often have some hidden hurdles. And as you talk with your utility, as you go through the process, you'll see there's different charges for different applications, and it's not really cookie cutter in any scenario. So trying to make sure that we cover our bases in all of these programs is how we've approached the design and the implementation to date. So they've been very successful. We've seen a lot of positive feedback and an adoption on these programs, and we're looking to the next stage so that we can build upon our successes, learn from any stumbling blocks that we've come across, and just continue to be a valuable resource for customers. We have one more. So this rounds out the rest of the PHI offerings. In different jurisdictions, we've tried different things. They came on in response to different regulatory environments. They came on in different years, so we were able to draw from our learnings in other jurisdictions and build out different programs across the board. But what we've come to coalesce around has been a make-ready focused program offerings is where we see the future going. And again, trying to figure out how we can design time of use rates and other pieces like that can drive towards the management of it. So our focus going forward is going to be those last hurdles for make-ready installation and looking at the time of use rates and managed charging. So those are where our future is pointed, but a lot of great examples of successful programs that we've implemented to date.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince. Really appreciate it. So before we hand it back over to GSA and Liz, I'm going to hand it to Chris to go over a fleet calculator tool. This is a new tool that's on our website that can be used for planning purposes. And then those will go into GSA specific requirements. So Chris, I'll hand it to you.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm Chris Chica. I'm the product owner for the LCS for our large customer services managed energy use program. We built out a tool that can help give a high-level estimate on what your fleet charging infrastructure needs to look like, and specifically the tool estimates how long it will take to charge a vehicle based on your charging infrastructure and the types of vehicles you have. It's currently only available for Pepco, but should be available for all opcos by the end of the year. So you get to it by going to the Pepco website. You go to large customer services. It's within the LCS hub. And it's the first card here, the commercial vehicle electrification card. You click into it, and the first thing you see is just some information about what you need to electrify your fleet in terms of your team and some of your operational things you need to consider. After that, we have some information about charges, different types of chargers, different kind of vehicles, generally just informational things on the site to look through. But the tool we want to share right here is at the bottom, and it's a pretty simple to use calculator. But if you you would punch in the number of light duty vehicles, medium duty vehicles, and heavy duty vehicles you have. Let's say I have 5 trucks and 5 vans. I get an estimate on what that my battery capacity would be. Then I can play around with the different charging infrastructure I might consider buying out. So let's say I'm going to buy 5 level 3 chargers. I can estimate around how long it would take for me to charge my whole fleet. Here it would take 3 to 10 hours, but so maybe that's overkill. So if I do 2 chargers, 8 to 23, so maybe that's not enough. But it helps you kind of get a high level directional understanding of exactly what you need to build out before you can speak to a contractor or an engineer to help you nail down the specifics. It's a pretty straightforward tool, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it if anyone has anything.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So I think we'll hold questions to the end, and then we'll now hand it back to Liz to go through some GSA requirements as well. So Liz, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint as you start your presentation.
Okay. So what you've heard a lot about so far are about a lot of the electrical capacity requirements and the actual fleet electrification focus. Excuse me. So if you go to the next slide, there are just what we might consider some lessons learned from EVSE installations so far in this region, and some of the key takeaways. There are so many, so I tried to keep this list very short. It was hard, but what these are related to are actually about the installation of the infrastructure. So not the vehicle procurement. This is how you actually go about installing the charging station and all of the supply equipment that is needed to power the charging stations. So there are a few items that are project requirements for anything installed in a GSA building, again, whether it's owned or leased or delegated, um, that people might not think about when they think, okay, we've ordered, we are slowly switching our fleet over. We are switching it all over to electric vehicles or ZEVs when the time comes to replace the vehicle. We want to install some charging stations. I know an individual charging station only costs a few $1,000s. How much can it cost? There are a number of requirements that would drive up the cost or make a project take much longer than you think it might, that you wouldn't ordinarily think about if you were just installing something in your home or another just kind of a charging station at a gas station. So key among these are the biggies. Fire protection requirements. And I'm sorry I'm saying so much. It's late in the day. So there are a lot of fire life safety specific requirements that go with installing EVSE. And again, that is for any GSA owned and operated property. And so there is an extensive guidance document that has been issued, and it's basically to ensure that any EVSE installation will adhere to National Fire Protection Association and National Energy Code requirements. There are a lot related to electric vehicle charging stations and the infrastructure. So some of the requirements might be that if it's a parking garage, there has to be an automatic sprinkler system installed throughout it. There are standpipe requirements. There are nozzle requirements and signage requirements for local fire firefighters to be able to utilize if they ever need to pull into the garage. So depending on your location and how old your facility is, there might need to be a fire protection element included in any sort of EVSE installation project. If everything is all up to code, if everything totally meets what's in these requirements, then you're good to go. But otherwise, keep that in mind that meeting fire protection requirements could possibly increase the cost of a project substantially, especially if, again, you have to sprinkler everything. Or if an outdoor lot is the only place to install the charging equipment is right near any kind of vegetation, there has to be something worked out there. So another area that people don't often think about that can, again, delay project implementation or potentially drive up cost are accessibility requirements. And by that, I mean that EVSE projects need to meet the requirements that are outlined in the Architectural Barriers Act and Accessibility Standard, that's known as ABAS. It is very similar to the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, but projects in GSA buildings follow ABAS. And at least whenever any EVSE installation is going in, there needs to be at least one accessible parking space included with charging with a port. So let's say you're just putting in one dual port charging station, just one, that spot has to be an accessible parking space. And that would usually be defined as 11 feet wide, 20 feet long, with a 5-foot adjoining access aisle. There are also other requirements about the weight of a cord. They're all laid out on the ABAS website, and if people need access to that, if you can't find it, reach out to me. I will direct you there. The other major, so the top 3 are the big showstoppers, or the areas where we found that have caused delays in projects. The third one is IT security. And that's become a very big focus over the past year or so. So if anyone on this call has recently worked on an installation project, you might be aware of FedRAMP, the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program, if you've never heard of it before. So all network capable or cloud-based systems that store or process any government data. So we're not just talking about EVSE, but any cloud-based system that's going to store government data has to be FedRAMP authorized. So if someone wants to install charging station at their building and it needs to be network capable, if you remember, that was the requirement of a GSA directive, needs to be network capable. The machine itself has to be FedRAMP authorized. So right now, GSA has some blanket purchase agreements for EVs and EVCs, and any of the vendors that sell the charging infrastructure must be FedRAMP approved, must be FedRAMP authorized. Right now, 2 of the vendors on the BPA are FedRAMP authorized. They are ChargePoint and Chargy. The other vendors are in various stages of meeting FedRAMP compliance. Several of them are due to finalize that process late in or during the first quarter of FY25. So by the end of the calendar year, this calendar year, there should be several more vendors that are available to use to install EV charging stations at your building. So as I say, those are like the 3 really big areas that have been known to hold up projects. There are others that people need to take into consideration when they are looking to install EVSE, besides network capable, metering. Again, that's so the electricity can be metered, can be monitored very easily. And if charging stations are being installed so that tenants can use them for their private vehicles or personally owned vehicles, that is permissible. There is legislation known as the FAST Act, the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. It actually dates from about 2015, that allows the federal agencies to install charging stations for POV use as long as the people who are charging their vehicles reimburse the government for the electricity. And there is a nominal fee tacked onto that to help slowly reimburse the government for the purchase of that charging station over time. But it's nominal. So part of being networked and metered enables the tenant agency to set up the users to charge their personal vehicles. It's very easy to do. And then the agency would work with GSA to set a reasonable rate. So it's literally just a few cents per kilowatt hour that's being drawn, and maybe a flat fee of $1 or $2 for actually plugging in. So it's not as though federal buildings have set up petrol pumps where some people can just drive in and when the commuting to the office and they can charge their vehicle and they can fill up their vehicle for free with fuel. You can't do that. Of course, it's the same thing with electric vehicle charging, but the reimbursement is very slight. You would amount to about a few dollars a charge. So it's no big deal. Some of these other requirements, they're very basic. You've got to have lighting around a charging station for both safety, so people can be seen and see what's near them, and also to make it easy to read the equipment. There's got to be ventilation provided if charging stations are enclosed are installed in enclosed areas. There's labeling that has to be included, like to indicate what the panel board is, the circuit number, little things like that, again, they won't really add to the cost of a project so much, but they might add to the time if something needs to be added or modified. About the personal charging stations going in now need to be able to accept RFID cards or credit cards. And again, that's just so the tenant pulls up, they can swipe the card, boom, they can just be charged that way. It's very simple. I do have 2 other areas that I want people to keep in mind. They may or may not apply to your facility, and that is compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act. So far at our buildings and in this region, we do have a number of historic facilities. We have not run into issues complying with historic preservation, But that is something to keep in mind if you are in a historic building, you want to install infrastructure, and especially if the infrastructure might be outside of your building, as opposed to, like, you might not have a garage. It might be something on the street near your building, or if you have a courtyard. So keep that in mind. And the National Capital Planning Commission, bless them, would care very much if someone did install charging infrastructure outside of their building where it's visible to passersby. And I mention that because there are, for instance, portable, non-attached solar-powered charging stations that are available. They're not too large, but they're modular. They can be trucked in, dumped off, boom, they have a solar canopy, very easy to use. You don't have to deal with trying to install it, running conduit. But if that were outside of your building, the National Capital Planning Commission would really want to look at that and see what effect that would have on the visuals and the aesthetics of your building. No comment. So I want people to keep those in mind. There were other considerations that are just very basic. So that EV planning, that roadmap that Pepco showed earlier, there are just other really basic considerations. If you know you're installing charging stations, you would work with your GSA project manager or your own agency's project manager to make sure that the charging equipment is as close to the electrical panel as possible to minimize any trenching or conduit that would have to go in. So I did want to mention, when you're going through this slide deck later, the images that were on the earlier slide with the EOs show, the larger one shows a very recent installation, and it shows how the charging stations have bollards placed in front of them to avoid having cars hit them. Shows the painting showing an accessible area delineated between other parking spaces. It shows that there is signage that is there. There has to be signage showing that these spaces are reserved for just charging in general. You can, even if you look really close, you could see that the power supply is very close. It's not very far away. It's a building backed station. The other image also shows if the charging equipment is actually suspended from the ceiling, how low down it is. And again, it's very close to the power supply. So those are considerations to keep in mind if you are ready to reach out to GSA about installing infrastructure. I did also want to mention that something we care about and Pepco would care about are considerations of the electric grid. So managed charging was mentioned earlier, and GSA would care very much about trying to have employees minimize their charging during peak demand. So think of the summer we just had. Think of just last month, where we had half a dozen incredibly hot days where the local utilities issued curtailment orders. Say from the hours of 2 to 6 p.m., curtail electricity usage in your building. So one of the things we would ask is, please don't charge your electric vehicle during those times if you do not need to. So managed charging and that network capability would help to shut down or reduce the ability of people to just plug a vehicle into the charger during these peak times. And we also would prefer, if people are looking to install charging stations, that they really look at level 2 charging station. They come in level 1, level 2, and level 3, which is also known as DC fast. And DC fast can charge a vehicle very quickly, but it pulls a lot more electricity. So most vehicles that the federal government would use, especially in this region, a level 2 charger would work just fine. You would use it during the day, you'd return it to the building, you'd plug it in, it could charge in the evening, and it would charge just fine with a level 2, which level 3 is probably not needed so much. It might be for some law enforcement reason, but we would encourage agencies to really look at not doing level 3 because of the amount of electricity that is pulled. I did want to note that most of what I'm talking about has to be followed by, again, GSA owned and operated buildings or government owned delegated buildings. There is some separate guidance for leased locations. So if you have you are only in leased facilities in this region and you really would like access to that information, let me know. I will send it to you. And one of the last things I do want to note here is that as much as I would love to be able to pay for all infrastructure, that is not how the world works. And agencies need to provide the funding for their own EVSE installations, unless, say, it is a brand new building or a full building modernization or renovation. So if you are looking to electrify your fleet, you know you need the infrastructure in place before the vehicles arrive. You, the agency, has to pay for the infrastructure, and that is usually done via RWA. So if you go to the next slide, and this will be wrapping it up, there are a couple of contract vehicles to make this very easy for people to do. Again, we have these blanket purchase agreements. And then we also have a design, build, and construction, definite delivery, and definite quantity contract. There are several. And any agency can order directly off of the BPA, or they can order directly off of the IDIQ. A lot of times what happens is agencies, even if they are in buildings that GSA does not own, like the Army Corps of Engineers, for instance, they can tap GSA through the IDIQ to manage their entire procurement process if they would like. So there are links to both of these contract vehicles. And if you have general questions about EVSE, about how to proceed, who to reach out to, this is the GSA's National Center for Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. This is their inbox. They are very responsive. If you have like really NCR specific questions, you can also reach out to me and I can try and get you to the right person. We have kind of an internal process here in the National Capital Region for getting the ball rolling on these projects. And then I do have a link to Federal Acquisition Service basic information. This deals more with the fleet itself. So if you have questions about electrifying your fleet, there's a link here and a separate link to specifically finding your local fleet manager. And then there is a mailbox for FAS here. So that is all I had. I know it was a lot and I hope I didn't take up too much time, but try to cram as much information as possible into this. So please let us know if you have questions.
Very good. Thank you so much, Liz. And we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. That's the end of the presentation. So it looks like Devin, you have a question. If you want to come off mute, the floor is yours.
I'm off mute. Hope you can hear me. Great information was great. Thank you for sharing. I actually had 3 questions and I think you actually answered them. We are going to get the slide deck presentation after this presentation is over. So that's great. Liz, I know you talked about the first slide. I didn't know if that was going to be in the presentation, but I would love to have that as well as the one you just referenced. So I don't know if I need to send you my email or you have it from this particular session itself. But the one big question I had is where my agency is in current, we're getting ready to, we just signed a new lease, which is a lease facilities. And we do have a couple of electric vehicles or hybrids that do both. And we want to do that. So I guess my question would be, when we do that, should we also be working with our GSA representative at that time so that we can put those parameters in place so that we can avoid some of these steps that we're talking about while we're doing the build out? Would be my question.
Yes. So if you are moving to a new lease location, absolutely work with your GSA, the realty specialist, or whoever it will be, when you're building out the terms of that lease. Absolutely.
Okay.
To make sure, so that the infrastructure is there or it's provided for, or if it needs to be built out, we need to work with the lessor to make sure the lessor is willing to do that.
Okay, and that works for us because it's brand new. We just literally signed it, and it's a dual agency. We both have those vehicles, so we're looking to do that within the garage because it's an enclosed garage, which is not historical. We don't have to worry about that National Historic Preservation. So that's going to work. And we saw, and I definitely wanted to capture those pictures that you showed where you had the post up in some certain areas. And I definitely wanted to get the other information about allowing POV for usage, knowing that they will be paying back. So it was great information. If I can just get that information as I provide the summaries to my senior leadership, I thought this was actually a pretty interesting call today.
Okay, yeah, so when you get the slide deck, if you want additional information that say is GSA specific or PEPCO specific,
Okay.
if you reach out, we'll be able to send you that additional information.
Okay. So will your information be on there as well, Liz?
Anything that's included in the slide deck, yes.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need to know.
And
Thank
I
you so much.
think everyone on this, I think the invitation for this to attend this, I think came from my GSA email
It
address.
did. Well,
So
mine
if you need
did.
to reach out to me, you can reach me that way. That's my
Okay.
email address.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So I think we might have time for one more question if anyone has a question.
Ma'am, what is the legal aspect if there is ignition or fire happens and no vehicles being charged at a GSA lease facility or agency-owned facility? What happens then at that point?
It was initially was coming through kind of faint. I apologize. Do you mind quite asking that question one more time, please?
It was incredibly difficult to hear you.
Oh, really? It's basically what's the legal aspect if there is some type of fire incident at the
Oh, that's a
charging
good one.
stations? Yeah.
That is a good one. You mean if like, who would be responsible
Yes,
if there
ma'am.
were a fire?
Yes, yes.
That's a really good question. And I do not know the answer. Let me reach out to our the GSA, the Fire Life Safety Branch, and I can get back to you. Let me just see. Michael Jones, you asked that?
Yes.
Okay. Let me reach out to our Fire Life Safety folks to see who might be responsible. I'm sure the answer ultimately would be it depends, but yeah, at the circumstances of the fire. But let me get a general answer for you.
Okay. Because our agency has its own electricians and technicians to install, GS charging stations. So would that fall on the agency? That fall on the manufacturers that's providing the equipment?
The responsibility to ensure compliance with fire protection regulations, or if there
Yes,
is a fire.
if there is, and if, like I said, if we have, like in my agency, we have our own, electricians and infrastructure to build charging stations, but we haven't started the process yet. So, like I said, we want to go ahead and try and start this process. So we have to go through GSA first before, because we already have vehicles already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so NIH's properties are all owned by NIH, correct?
Yes.
So you do not have to go through GSA. You can utilize that IDIQ that was mentioned, and we can absolutely provide guidance so that you are in compliance with, to make sure, especially for fire protection, that you are following all of the latest NFPA, NEC, UL requirements, and we can share a draft like scope of work that's got the latest requirements. Now, of course, some of these change frequently, especially ID security. It's like, how many iterations have we gotten of a scope of work for the past year? They keep being updated. But fire protection doesn't change as often. But as I say, I am not an expert on all of the fire protection requirements, and definitely if there were a fire, who would be responsible? So I definitely am reaching out to get an answer for you on that one, because I do
Okay.
not want to give you an incorrect answer.
Understood. Understood. Thank you, guys. Very, very informative information. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I do want to be mindful of folks' time. We've gone past there and lost a couple people. But I do just want to reiterate my appreciation for everyone joining. We're going to put this recording on a website, also include the slides on that same website that can be just passed around as a link. It might take a couple of days for us to do that, but we'll be making, as soon as it's available, we'll send it to you, Liz, as well as to Robin and Amy, and we can distribute it that way. But thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to all the attendees. And with that, we'll call it end of call. Have a good day. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all for your
Thank you.
participation. Bye.
Bye-bye.